During a relaxed Sunday family meal, I asked offhandedly, "Did you remember to collect my prescription? The doctor stressed it's critical." My father replied, "Ah, we used that cash for your sister's latest phone. She requires it for her studies." I froze, staring at them. "Fine. Then I suppose you overlooked the caution notice the pharmacist attached." My mother murmured, "Caution." What I said next made their faces drain of color. "Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there right now. I'd really enjoy knowing who's joining our circle." The quiet that settled afterward wasn't ordinary silence. It was dense, oppressive, as if every ounce of oxygen had vanished from the room. It was the sort of hush that typically signals an impending catastrophe, or, in our home, the kind that comes after a social misstep. My father, Michael, kept his gaze fixed on his plate. He carved his roast with the meticulous care of a specialist, or maybe just a man convinced that refusing to acknowledge an issue would make it disappear. My mother, Elizabeth, was already fidgeting, adjusting the flower arrangement in the center. Her restless tension rolled off her in waves. "Natalie, don't overreact," Michael said at last, still not lifting his eyes. "It's only medicine. We'll sort it out next week. Chloe needed the filming equipment for her channel. It's an investment in her prospects." "An investment," I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "Yes," he confirmed, finally meeting my gaze, his expression icy and blank. "An investment. Unlike your endless health costs." I glanced at Chloe, my radiant golden sibling. At 19, she brimmed with energy and vibrancy, completely engrossed in her brand new phone, trying different poses for her upcoming post. She hadn't even registered the discussion. She didn't need to. In this household, she was the masterpiece displayed on the wall, cherished and shielded. I was the framework, the beams, the padding, essential for the house to remain standing, yet unseen until a fracture appeared. I rose from my chair. My knees felt unsteady. A quiver coursed through my fingers that I concealed by balling my hands into fists. It was a recognizable feeling, the bodily sign of the neurological disorder I'd been handling privately for months. But this time the trembling wasn't merely anxiety. It was fury, a sharp, unyielding fury that lodged in my chest like a boulder. "Where are you headed?" Elizabeth asked, her tone high-pitched. "We haven't served dessert yet. I'm leaving," I stated. My voice remained calm, surprisingly steady. "And I won't return until you clarify why a gadget matters more to you than my well-being." "Natalie, sit down," Michael ordered. "You're causing a disturbance." "No," I replied, "I'm making a decision." I snatched my keys from the kitchen counter. They felt heavier than usual in my palm. I headed toward the exit, my steps resounding on the spotless marble flooring. I refused to glance behind me. I knew exactly what I'd witness. My mother's worried expression, my father's furious one, and Chloe still unaware, still flawless, still the focal point of their world. I climbed into my car and drove away. I didn't head to a friend's place. I didn't stop at a park to weep. I went directly to the pharmacy. The journey blurred into streaks of white lane markers and glowing brake lights. My thoughts raced, replaying the exchange, breaking it down, examining it like a set of architectural plans. "We used that cash for your sister's latest phone." It wasn't simple selfishness. It was a declaration of worth. My health, my very existence, valued at less than $2,800. When I arrived at the pharmacy, my fingers shook so violently I struggled to pull my card from my wallet. The amount appeared on the display, $2,450. It wiped out my entire reserve fund. Every dollar I'd scrimped from side gigs, from skipping lunches, from walking instead of riding the bus. I slid the card through. The terminal chimed, approved. I accepted the bag containing the medicine vials. It seemed almost weightless, trivial for something that had just drained my buffer completely. I returned to my car and remained there for a long while, gazing at the dashboard. I recalled the concept of the glass child syndrome. I'd come across it years earlier in a psychology lecture. The sibling of a child with special needs, or in my situation, special privilege, who is seen through, never truly noticed. The child expected to be flawless, trouble-free, invisible so the parents can concentrate on the one who sparkles. I had devoted my whole life to becoming invisible, to requiring minimal attention, to being the reliable daughter who asked for nothing. And it had earned me precisely zero recognition. I was translucent to them, but glass, when it fractures, turns dangerous. and I was finished being polished and unseen. I was prepared to draw blood. I turned the ignition. I wasn't returning to the house in Connecticut. I was heading to my city apartment, the modest studio I funded myself, the single space where I felt tangible, authentic, acknowledged. I had a strategy. It wasn't exactly revenge. It was a strategy for evaluation. A thorough inspection of the family I'd been supporting for 23 years. I reached my apartment and secured the door. The quiet here was different. It wasn't the stifling quiet of the Connecticut residence. It was a quiet I had selected. I settled at my desk and powered on my laptop. I accessed the family's shared online storage, the one I maintained because my father couldn't be troubled to figure out file organization. I began searching, not as a daughter but as an architect examining a structure for weaknesses, and I discovered them. Fissures in the base, irregularities in the accounts, funds shifting in improper ways. I spotted the deduction for Chloe's filming gear, $2,800, and immediately beside it, a transfer from my personal savings to the shared household account marked utilities. I had covered the power bill that month. I had paid for the electricity that lit their flawless meal. I continued probing. I reviewed the past 5 years, and there it was, a void. A huge, devastating gap in the family budget, $185,000, vanished. The timing matched a technology market surge that had collapsed dramatically. My father had gambled, and he had failed. I leaned back in my seat. The puzzle pieces were slotting together. The strain in the home, the fixation on appearances, the reluctance to spend on anything that didn't uphold the illusion of affluence. They weren't merely self-centered, they were bankrupt and they were petrified. I eyed the medicine package on my desk. The caution notice glared back, required state notification for inherited disorders. I reviewed it once more, then I studied the small print, non-treatment. Neglect inquiry, my phone vibrated. A message from Michael, "You're overreacting. The pharmacist is blowing it out of proportion. Return home, we have company tonight. You're needed to manage the food service." I stared at the text. Manage the food service. Not, are you all right? Not, did you obtain your medicine? Simply an order for labor, an order for the unseen daughter to reappear and keep everything flawless. I didn't respond. I launched a fresh file on my laptop. I named it Review. And I began writing. I was no longer merely a daughter. I was no longer a glass child. I was the examiner, and I was preparing to declare the structure unsafe. The following morning I awoke with a focus I hadn't experienced in ages. The usual nervousness that hummed in my chest like a caged bug was absent, replaced by a firm, icy determination. I administered my injection, the prick sharp as it entered, a reminder of the stakes. My hand didn't waver. I opened the family schedule. Aunt Catherine's birthday was approaching next week. Catherine, my father's sister, he rarely mentioned. The one who had wed a financial investigator and relocated to the city, declining to participate in the prestige games that obsessed the rest of the clan. I hadn't visited her in years, but I knew her address, and I knew she would comprehend. I printed the banking records I'd uncovered. I printed my health history, the diagnosis from months prior, and concealed the prescription denial slip. I organized everything into a tidy binder. Then I dressed, not in the muted, blend-in outfits I typically chose for family gatherings, but in my most professional suit, the one reserved for client meetings. I drove to Catherine's townhouse. She answered the door, clearly startled. She resembled my father, but gentler, her gaze keen and perceptive. "Natalie," she said. "What brings you here?" "I need your expertise," I replied, "or more precisely, I need your guidance." She noted the binder in my grip, then studied my expression. She moved aside and welcomed me in. "Come inside." We sat in her living area, encircled by shelves of books and artwork, a sharp contrast to the barren, pale surfaces of my parents' home. I spread out the papers. I guided her through the chronology, the failed investment, the years of precarious budgeting, the disregard, the filming gear. Catherine listened silently. She turned the pages, her face darkening. When she arrived at the medicine caution notice, she paused. She studied it, then raised her eyes to mine. "Do you realize the implications?" she asked. "It means if I skip treatment, the authorities step in," I answered. "It means far more," she said. "Check the insurance document." She opened a file on her laptop. It was a duplicate of my father's life insurance contract, an older one purchased long ago. The payments were modest, the benefit enormous. Millions. It was the sole genuine asset remaining to the family. The only barrier between them and complete collapse if Michael passed away. Examine the exclusion clause, Catherine said, indicating a section in fine text. I read it. Coverage nullified if any direct offspring is diagnosed with an inherited neurological illness before age 25. The space tilted. I clutched the table edge to steady myself. Inherited neurological. My illness, he knew I breathed. He knew that a formal diagnosis and official entry would cancel the coverage. That's why he avoided treatment. That's why he refused to cover the cost. He wasn't sparing $2,400, Catherine said, her tone firm. He was safeguarding $5 million. He was prepared to let you endure pain, to risk irreversible harm to secure his future comfort. I felt nauseous. Truly ill, it wasn't simple disregard, it was a deliberate equation. My mental health against his financial stability, and he had chosen the funds. And the caution notice, Catherine went on. The mandatory reporting. If the pharmacy marks this as severe non-adherence, it enters a registry, a state registry, which insurers track, so by refusing payment for the meds, I began. He activated the exact outcome he sought to prevent, Catherine completed, or he's on the verge. If that alert hasn't reached the system yet, it will shortly. I examined the documents, the proof of my father's deception. It was calculated. It was detached, and it was crushing. What should I do? I inquired. Catherine met my eyes. You complete the review. You present this to them. You reveal that you understand, and you observe their collapse. She rose and retrieved a checkbook from a drawer. She wrote a check and passed it to me. It was for $5,000, for the treatment, she said. And for whatever follows. You're not isolated in this, Natalie. We never truly were. We simply allowed the glass to thicken too much. Accept the check. I embraced her, clinging tightly. For the first time ever, I felt substantial. I felt recognized. I drove to my apartment, the binder on the seat beside me like a primed device. I possessed the facts now. I held the advantage, and I had a strategy. I waited until Sunday, the day of the routine family gathering, the day everyone would attend. I entered the house, the key my mother had insisted I surrender still attached to my ring. The home was hushed, the air conditioner softly whirring. They were in the dining area just beginning their meal. Natalie, Elizabeth cried, half standing. We were so concerned. You ignored all our messages. Are you ready to say sorry? I approached the table. I didn't take a seat. I set the binder on the pale marble before my father. I'm not here to say sorry, I declared. I'm here to balance the accounts. Michael eyed the binder, then me. What is this? It's the price of family business, I answered. Open it. He flipped it open. He viewed the transaction records, the health documents, the duplicate of the insurance contract with the clause marked in yellow. His complexion turned ashen. You, he stammered, you accessed my confidential files. I oversee your cloud storage, Dad, I said. Remember, you requested I handle it because you couldn't be bothered. This is, he glanced at Chloe, then Elizabeth. This is a mistake. Is it? I questioned. Is the $185,000 deficit a mistake? Is the provision that cancels your $5 million benefit if I'm diagnosed a mistake? Elizabeth inhaled sharply. She turned to Michael. Michael, is that accurate? He stayed silent. He merely glared at me, his eyes mixing terror and loathing. You ungrateful, he muttered. I did this for the family. For all of you, if that benefit is canceled, we're left with nothing. Nothing. We'd be ruined, do you grasp that? So my well-being was the sacrifice, I asked. My mind was the security, it was a mild issue. He yelled, rising, you could have coped, a bit of lightheadedness. Some shaking, you could have tolerated it. But no, you insisted on drama. You insisted on specialists. You insisted on documentation. I suffer from a progressive neurological disease, Dad. I said, my volume increasing for the first time. Without treatment, I lose movement. I lose mental clarity. I lose myself, and you knew and you didn't care. I care about maintaining shelter for us. He roared, I care about Chloe's potential. She has talent, she's destined for success. You're merely an architect. You sketch plans, she's a rising star, there it was. The raw, unattractive truth. I was the laborer, Chloe was the prized one. I was replaceable. Well, I said, my tone returning to that chilled calm. I have an update. The caution notice. What of it? He barked, the one on the medicine package. The one you disregarded. It states that serious failure to follow treatment for an inherited disorder requires compulsory state review. He stiffened. Because you didn't collect the meds, I continued. The pharmacy database registered it, automatically. It was forwarded to the state health department yesterday. I received confirmation this morning. I drew a notice from my pocket and placed it on the table. They've launched a probe into medical negligence, and since it's inherited, I shifted my gaze to Chloe. They've scheduled mandatory testing for all minors in the residence. Chloe lifted her eyes from her phone, wide with shock. What does that involve? It means, I said, facing Michael, that the authorities will screen Chloe, and if she carries the marker, which is probable, it enters her permanent file. Instantly. Michael collapsed into his seat. He appeared as if struck. Insurance providers are notified of state probes, I added. It's standard procedure. So not only is the benefit canceled, you've rendered your favored child uninsurable. The quiet in the room was total. It was the noise of a glass structure fracturing pane by pane. You destroyed us, Elizabeth breathed. No, I replied. You destroyed yourselves. I simply illuminated the flaws. I turned and departed. I didn't bang the door. I shut it softly, decisively. The soft click of the lock echoed louder than anything. I drove off. I didn't know my destination, but I knew I wasn't returning. I was liberated. I was substantial, and for the first time I was designing something unbreakable. The following months passed in a haze of court dates and quiet. The eviction notice on my parents' home arrived 2 weeks later. The insurance review was quick and merciless. The benefit was nullified for concealment and fraud. Michael faced possible accusations, but mainly he faced devastation. Chloe tested positive for the marker. She was enraged, not at the condition, but at the stain on her record. She faulted me briefly, then shifted blame to our parents. When the funds vanished, so did her content creator ambitions. She found employment. A genuine position. She left home, resentful and sobered. I remained in my apartment. I continued my treatment. The quivering ceased, the vertigo eased. My thoughts were clear, focused. I worked on my blueprints. I began a fresh design, a public hub with walls of glass. But glass that was tempered, resilient, enduring. One night I sat on my balcony, watching the urban glow. I reflected on my family. I didn't despise them. Despise requires effort. I simply felt detached. As if they were figures from a novel I'd completed. I was no longer a glass child. I was the designer of my own existence. And the base was firm. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a twist. Stay tuned to Reddit Tales Times for your daily dose of drama, laughs, and unbelievable stories.